All right, today we are tearing into a corporate financial report from 63 Moons Technologies. And our goal here is pretty simple. We're going to take all this dense data and turn it into a story that actually makes sense. Where's the money coming from? Where's it all going? And what's left at the end of the day? Let's get right into it.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll figure out what this report even is. Then, we'll follow the money coming in by looking at their income. Then we'll track where it all went by digging into the expenses. And finally, we'll see what it all means for their profit story.
Okay, so before we dive headfirst into the numbers, let's just take a second to get our bearings and make sure we know exactly what we're looking at here.
I mean, have you ever opened one of these things and your eyes just immediately glaze over? Yeah, you're not alone. They can feel pretty impenetrable, almost like they're written in a different language. And this is why. This is what the raw data actually looks like. It's just a wall of codes and numbers that honestly doesn't tell you a whole lot by itself. So our job is to pull out the important threads from this jumble and weave them into a story. To do that, we first need to define a couple of key terms.
So the first thing you have to know is that this is what's called a standalone report. And this is crucial. It just means we're looking at the books for the main 63 Moons company and only that company, not any of the other businesses it might own.
You're also going to see terms like Q1 or Q2 thrown around. That's just corporate speak for a 3-month period. It's how companies chop up the year to report on their performance. Okay, with that groundwork laid, let's get to the interesting part.
All right, let's jump into Section 2, the income statement. It's time to follow the money coming in.
Now this is where things get really interesting right away. Take a look at this one quarter, Q2 of 2019. On the left, you've got revenue from operations. That's the money they make from their main business, at about 36.5 crore rupees. But look right next to it. Other income is almost exactly the same, at 36.6 crore. So right off the bat, we see that roughly half the money coming into this company isn't even from its core business. That's a huge clue.
So add those two basically equal halves together, and you get the total income for the quarter, 73.06 crore rupees. That's our starting point. That's all the money that came in the door. But the real question is, how much of that did they actually get to keep? Well, for that, we have to look at where the money went out.
Which, of course, brings us to our third section, the expense report. Where did all that money go?
Okay, first major expense category, employee benefits. For this quarter, the company spent over 28 crore rupees on its people. Salaries, benefits, the whole shebang. A pretty big chunk of that income we just saw.
But then you see this, a line item just called Other Expenses, and it's a whopping 34.48 crore rupees. Wait a minute, that's actually their single biggest expense. It's even more than what they paid their entire workforce.
So naturally, when you see a vague category like that eating up most of the cash, you have to ask, what in the world is hiding in other expenses? And here's our answer. When you break it down, a massive 65.5%, basically 2/3 of their biggest expense, is just one thing: legal and professional charges. I mean, think about that. The company's #1 cost during this time wasn't research or marketing or new equipment, it was legal fees.
Okay, so we've got income split down the middle and expenses being driven by lawyers. Let's see what happens when you put those two things together in our final section, the profit story.
This timeline tells a really dramatic story. Back in the first quarter of 2018, things looked great, a healthy profit of almost 35 crore. But then, look what happens. Just a few months later, they've swung to a loss of 26 crore. The bleeding continues into 2019, and by the end of 2020, it has ballooned into a staggering loss of over 97 crore rupees. This isn't just a dip, it's a complete nosedive.
And this kind of wild swing has a direct impact on the one number that investors really care about: earnings per share. This basically tells you how much profit or loss is tied to every single share of the company's stock.
So, back in that good quarter in 2018, each share you owned represented about 7.59 rupees in profit, a solid, positive number.
Now, let's fast forward to the end of 2020. That positive number isn't just gone, it has been completely flipped on its head. Now, every single share represents a loss of more than 21 rupees. The contrast here is just stark.
So, after digging through that wall of data, what's the story? It really boils down to 3 main points. First, their income is weirdly split between their actual business and other stuff. Second, their expenses are being absolutely dominated by legal bills. And third, as a result, they went from being nicely profitable to losing a ton of money in just a couple of years.
In the end, a financial report like this is really just a look in the rear-view mirror. It shows us where the company has been. And for 63 Moons, it's been a bumpy ride with a strange income mix and a bottom line sinking under legal fees. So the big question this report leaves us with is, what will the next chapter of their story look like?